I was going to say, Lime's Instagram and social media is amazing. And I was looking at all of the partnerships that you had and wanted to ask, is that a huge part of Lime's strategy with reaching areas across the globe? And why are partnerships so important? And now after you saying that, going on a local level is genius. I didn't even think about tapping into that. But could you just explain, the partnerships and why that's a huge part of the strategy?
Yeah, sure. And I share the admiration for our social media team. I mean, they are so good at what they're doing, and I think bring such an authentic voice to the conversation. So appreciate you saying that. Kudos to the team that runs that. They have done an amazing job.
I'm like watching other people have fun on a
yeah,
screen, right?
they do.
I'm like, wow, how sad is my life here on Friday night, right?
Yeah, I mean, they really, I think, have done a great job. It's a good example of bringing authenticity, a little bit of edge to the conversation. I mean, we are pretty edgy about car use. And, we did, the team had a great initiative in a past Valentine's Day where they wrote or helped sort of create these sort of breakup letters with your car. And they find ways of being culturally relevant and edgy and on brand and on mission, which I think is just awesome. But to get to your point around local markets, we operate in 250 markets around the globe, and we try to give a significant amount of autonomy to those local teams. I mean, not only do the local ops team run the P&L, but they also think about what is the most valuable partnership for the local market, and they are the ones who know best, right? And when you're running a global business, you really just can't be doing that from a single central place, right? LA, Chicago, DC might be very different from London, Barcelona, and Tel Aviv, right? And we want to give the autonomy to local teams to be able to run markets well and find those partnerships that have the most impact.
Wow.
And you have a pretty high profile partnership with Uber. Is that?
Yeah, it is.
They seem like a competitor. How did that come about?
Well, they were a competitor, and it's a great question. So right now, as you mentioned, we are integrated into the Uber app. So if you are in London, for example, you pop open either Google Maps, you'll see us alongside other mobility options, including taxis and ride hail. But if you open up the Uber app, you'll see an alternative option to a car with the Lime products, so bike, scooter, whatever's in the market. And essentially the partnership is, of course, they take a little bit of revenue from that. They're an investor in Lime, and so in some ways it serves their interest to serve more trips. They actually found that the short haul trips that we provide most, the 1 kilometer, 2 kilometer, 3 kilometer trips, actually, one, they have a significant carbon impact that they want to help solve, but two, are kind of costly for them. They're drawing riders away from longer trips.
The drivers don't want to do those short hauls.
So in many ways, it's like any good business partnership, it's a true win-win. And cities love it because they're seeing us directly find ways to create a mode shift. And for us, the mode shift that is most impactful is when we can take people out of a car, out of a taxi or ride-hail vehicle, and replace it with a fully electric bike or scooter. And so, across the business, we've provided over 100 million trips that have prevented car trips. So our riders are having a significant impact on reducing congestion, reducing carbon, and reducing local particulate emissions in cities that we serve.
Do you think the average consumer, whether you're a customer or not, understands what sustainability is now? Or do you need to take airtime or words to sort of educate on, hey, this is the pollution avoidance here, or the decarbonization results? Are we sophisticated enough on average to kind of get it?
I don't think so, and I don't say that to diminish my respect for riders and their capacity to understand these things. But I think often people will relate to things that are just the most relevant to their lives. So, for example, can I take a bike or a scooter and avoid a bus transfer that might have me miss dinner time with the kids? That's what is so relevant to people. So can I get home more efficiently, more affordably? I think a sort of a next level sort of appreciation is, am I doing something that I intuitively have a sense helps the environment and is lower carbon. I don't think people get to such a deep level of, what is the mode shift of Lime and how does it compare numerically to a ride-hail trip from Uber. I don't think that's really the level that people are getting to, but they also have a decent sense of what is sort of on its face better for the environment. But I do think people have a real tactile relationship with, do I get home more efficiently? Do I get home with some more fun and some joy? Or, do I make it home for bedtime with the kids? Like, that's what matters to people.
Yeah. I want to talk about the branding of Lime and the strategy that goes along with that. I know we talked briefly about the social media and the marketing, but how important is the brand of Lime?
Well, I think in many ways, people outside of the organization are probably better equipped to share that answer. I mean, I think, I was just recently in London where Lime is truly used as a verb, which any company wants to be in a place where they're used as a verb, right? I'm going to go take a Lime to X, or, hey, should we go Lime? Like that suggests a cultural relevance. And if you go to a place like London, you can see how culturally relevant the mobility service is. And so, I think, again, like people outside of the company, I think can better reflect on like, what does the brand mean and how does it reflect on the business, et cetera. But I think of it as, how are we relating to people and how are people relating to us? And if we're being used as a verb in these markets around the globe, I think that suggests that we've sort of reached a place of permanence and relevance and impact.
Yeah. And I guess to follow that, how does Lime connect with the customers, you could say? Like, are there specific customer teams that really, I guess my question is, how are you getting, the feedback and the information from your riders?
Yeah, it's a sort of many-pronged process. And, I think the nice thing about scooters and bikes in the way that we operate is at the most sort of basic level, we interact by them being out on the, parked on the sidewalk outside of the walking lane of travel, so people can see them and then they relate with them. They're like, oh, maybe we should take this mode instead of taking a car, for example. So I think what's different about our business compared to most is we don't spend much on marketing, like because they market themselves. We're in these markets and people see it, and they have a level of cultural understanding of how to use the product. And then I think we spend a lot of time trying to understand our riders through conversations and testing. So when we come out with a new product, like we talked about with like the Lime Glide or Lime Bike, we're asking people, we're saying what's working, what's not, what do you like, what don't you like? Back to when I was in London, I joined a commuter club, an event that the local team was hosting. And essentially it was during peak commute hours in a pretty dense area of travel in a park. And we had a pop-up there and the team was there and riders were stopping by. And you can't help but get feedback from people when you're doing things like that. We're obviously providing helmets to them and we're making ourselves culturally relevant to them, but they're also providing just as much feedback to us.
My experience has been anybody that cycles a lot has an opinion about the gear.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
So it's not just a Vermont thing, Nicole, right? Really cool. I want to talk about, you talk about the local markets and the teams. Did you set up this footprint? It was like one city at a time, right? Because part of your early career was this intersection of sort of forward policy with mobility. Like, are you still fighting those battles to open up markets, or is it more a mature footprint and it's kind of tuning maybe the specific vehicle or bike that they want?
Yeah, it's definitely a much more mature market. 8 years ago, there was no what we call dockless bikes or scooters in any markets. And what we were doing is bringing a new product to the market that cities and the public had to really adapt to. And frankly, there were no rules that governed that behavior. And so when we would go to cities, they very often had an incumbent bike share operator, usually or always a station-based operator. So in many ways, we were going to these cities in direct competition with publicly funded bike share programs with very little regulation. So we'd go to them and sometimes it would be just get a business license, or are we being treated like a concession that's selling T-shirts on the sidewalk, or like what are we?
Right.
And so it was very difficult. It was very tactical in terms of how to get into each and every single market. Fast forward to where we are today, 8.5 almost years later, and the market's matured where now cities are issuing RFPs and they're saying, we want 1, 2, or 3 operators. We want them for this period of time, and you have to meet this certain criteria, and we're going to select the best ones. So they're going to look at environmental performance, operational performance, hardware, different characteristics of a business, and they're going to decide, all right, who's the best bet? And that's where we see the regulation and the regulatory environment now. And that's a big change from 8 years ago.
I remember when you first, encouraged me to get on a Lime bike. It was in Austin, Texas for a conference or something. It was literally the Wild West. There was probably 5 or 6 companies competing. Scooters were everywhere from the river to the front door at the hotel. And surprisingly, there were more scooters at the time at the back door to the hotel.
Oh, interesting.
That I believe the workforce was using as a better form of public transportation. So there might be 2 out front and 20 out back, which it was just something I never would have guessed. But their data probably shows.
Yeah, we've definitely seen that workers that work off-hour shifts when public transportation is less reliable or may not be running as consistently or regularly, that's a huge market right there because they have a transportation need. I mean, originally, the business was started to help solve and connect that sort of first and last mile. I use mile in quotes because now it could be 3 miles or 4 miles. But the goal was to help sort of bridge that gap between public transportation and the final destination, or being able to go sort of intra-city from your office to a business meeting without having to get in a car or public transportation if that wasn't running in that short haul. To these things where you see other use cases where people are using it because off hours there is a need.
Or it's cheaper than an automobile now, right? The economics have changed.
And one of the things, not to go back to London, but it's just such a great example, but when I was there, every single time I looked at the map, and it was faster to take a bike, that predominantly bikes there, and obviously far more affordable. And that was everything from the 35-minute bike ride from the warehouse up north to a 10-minute bike ride within the city. Like, it spanned the gamut of the trips that I wanted to take. And obviously, being in the business, I'm always looking at, all right, are we on par financially? Can we get there faster? Like, what's the friction? And it was amazing to see that the friction really wasn't there.
Wow. Whoa.